Imagine you wake up one morning, open your phone, search for a flat to rent, and there is almost nothing available. The few properties that do exist, the price has gone up again. You apply. 10 other people apply for the same place, and the landlord picks whoever offers more money up front. That is not a nightmare. That is the UK rental market right now. And in 2026, it is about to get a whole lot more intense. Here is the thing that most people are completely missing. And I mean most people, even people who follow property news closely. The crisis you are about to experience as a renter is not being caused by rising demand alone. It is being caused by something happening on the other side of the equation. Landlords, by the thousands, are quietly walking away, and every single one that leaves takes rental homes off the market with them. By the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly why this is happening, what it means for you whether you rent, own, or invest in property, and, most importantly, what you can actually do about it. This is one of those videos where you will thank yourself for watching the whole thing, because the information at the end could genuinely change a financial decision you make this year. Welcome to NestPath UK. Let's talk about the housing shift that is rewriting the rules. So let me start with a number that stopped me in my tracks. In 2025 alone, approximately 93,000 buy-to-let landlords exited the UK rental market. Not a few, not a trickle, 93,000. And experts are already warning that 110,000 more could leave in 2026. That is not a slow decline. That is a collapse in slow motion. Now, before you feel sorry for landlords, or before you celebrate if you are a renter who has been burned by a bad landlord, I want you to stop and think about what this actually means in practical terms. Because this is where most people's thinking stops too early. When a landlord exits the market, one of two things happens to that property. Either another landlord buys it and continues renting it out, which keeps the supply stable, or a first-time buyer purchases it and moves in. In the second case, that property disappears from the rental market permanently. And right now, that second scenario is happening at scale. So you have fewer rental homes available. You have the same number, or more, people who need to rent. And the landlords who remain? They can charge whatever they like because there is a queue of desperate tenants at the door. Average private rents in the UK rose by 3.5% to £1,374 per month as of early 2026, according to the Office for National Statistics. In England specifically, average monthly rents have now exceeded $1,400, and Zoopla is forecasting another 2.5% increase across 2026. That might sound moderate, but remember, these are averages. In London, Manchester, Bristol, and Birmingham, the numbers are far steeper. Now, why are landlords leaving? That is the crucial question, and the answer is not simple. It is a perfect storm of things hitting at exactly the same time. The biggest one, and I cannot overstate how significant this is the Renters' Rights Act. This became law in October 2025, and its first phase kicks in on the 1st of May 2026. Let me explain what this does, because it is the most sweeping change to tenancy law in a generation. Section 21, what used to be called no-fault evictions, has been abolished. That means a landlord can no longer simply ask a tenant to leave at the end of their tenancy without giving a legal reason. Under the old system, a landlord could serve a Section 21 notice and regain possession of their property fairly cleanly. That is gone. Now they must use Section 8, which means proving a specific legal ground like rent arrears or breach of contract and going through the courts. For good landlords with reliable tenants, this changes very little. But for landlords who have had problem tenants, or for those who simply want flexibility over their property, this feels like the final straw. Nearly 2 in 5 landlords, 39%, have said the Renters' Rights Act may force them to leave the market entirely. And that is not all the Act does. Fixed-term tenancies are being replaced with open-ended periodic tenancies. Tenants can give just 2 months' notice and leave at any time. Landlords can only raise rents once every 12 months and must give 2 months' written notice using a formal process. Tenants can challenge any rent increase at a tribunal. And contractual rent review clauses, the ones that used to allow automatic annual increases, are now invalid. Add to this a second wave of change coming later in 2026, a national private rented sector database and a landlord ombudsman scheme. Landlords will need to register, be accountable, and comply with new standards or face enforcement action. I want to be honest with you here. As someone who covers the UK housing market on NestPath UK, I believe tenant protections matter. People deserve security in their homes. But here is the paradox, and it is a painful one. Policies designed to protect renters are, right now, triggering an exodus of landlords that is shrinking the supply of rental homes. And a smaller supply means higher rents and a more competitive market. The very people the law was meant to help are facing the sharpest consequences. Now let us talk about the financial pressure, because it is just as powerful as the regulatory pressure. Many landlords took out buy-to-let mortgages years ago when interest rates were sitting close to zero. When the Bank of England raised the base rate aggressively, it hit 5.25% before gradually coming back down to around 4.25%. Those landlords found their monthly mortgage costs jumping by hundreds of pounds. For some with smaller portfolios and tighter margins, the numbers simply stopped adding up. Meanwhile, Section 24, the tax change that restricts mortgage interest relief for individual landlords, has been quietly eroding profitability since it was phased in from 2017. A landlord who used to be able to offset their full mortgage interest against their rental income now cannot. Higher rate taxpayers were hit hardest, and the recent autumn budget added further tax on rental income, sending another wave of landlords toward the exit. Maintenance costs are up, energy compliance requirements are tightening, insurance premiums have risen, and landlords face increasing standards around electrical safety, the Decent Home Standard, and energy efficiency ratings. The result? What used to be a relatively passive income stream has become a full-time headache for part-time landlords. And for those with just one or two properties, which describes the majority of UK landlords historically, the calculation has changed completely. Here is something fascinating that almost nobody is talking about. As the small individual landlords leave, who is moving in to take their place? Professional investors, corporate structures, institutional capital, build-to-rent developers. In 2025, 43% of all buy-to-let mortgages were taken out through limited company structures, a record high. Large-scale operators are acquiring the properties that small landlords are selling, consolidating them into managed portfolios and running them at scale. In other words, the private rental sector is not disappearing, it is transforming. The era of the accidental landlord, someone who rented out a spare property, a flat they moved out of, an inheritance they did not want to sell, is ending. What is replacing it is a more professionalized institutional market. Build-to-rent developments alone have attracted over £35 billion of investment. These are purpose-built rental blocks managed by companies, not individuals. What does this mean for you as a renter? Honestly, mixed. Professional management often means better maintained properties, faster repairs, clearer contracts, but it also tends to mean higher rents and less flexibility. A corporate landlord is not going to give you a break on rent because you have had a hard month. And what does this mean for someone considering property investment? Because I know many of you watching NestPath UK are thinking about this. This is where it gets genuinely interesting. The landlords who survive and who thrive in 2026 and beyond are going to be the ones who adapt it. The window of opportunity here is real. With 93,000 landlords leaving in 2025 and potentially 110,000 more in 2026, the competition among remaining landlords is falling. Good properties in strong rental locations are going to let easily. Quality landlords who treat their properties like businesses, who comply with regulations, maintain standards, build good tenant relationships, are going to stand out in a market where the amateurs have left. Rental yields may actually rise in certain areas as supply tightens. Demand is not going away. Fewer people can afford to buy, which means more people need to rent for longer. The barrier to home ownership remains high. House prices continue to grow, mortgage affordability is still stretched, and stamp duty changes have added cost for many buyers. For investors who can structure their ownership correctly through a limited company with the right legal and tax advice, targeting the right type of property in the right location, there is a real case to be made that 2026 represents a buying opportunity. Not because property is cheap, but because the competition among landlords is shrinking. Let me also talk about where the rental pressure is most acute. Because the UK is not one housing market, it is many. London remains the most expensive and most competitive city. Rental inflation in prime central London has been more moderate, around 2% annually, because rents there already hit affordability ceilings. But in outer London and commuter zones, the pressure is significant. Manchester, Bristol, Birmingham, and university towns are seeing the sharpest competition. These are areas where demand consistently outstrips supply, where young professionals and students compete for limited housing, and where landlord exits hit the hardest. In contrast, areas like Hull, Burnley, and parts of Wales offer far more affordable rents and are actually attracting a different type of investor, those willing to trade city glamour for better yields and less competition. For anyone who is currently renting and feeling the squeeze, let me give you some genuinely practical advice. First, if you are in a good property with a reasonable landlord, do everything you can to stay. The tenant turnover process is where renters lose the most. Moving costs, gaps between tenancies, the cost of deposits, these all add up. Stability is your asset. Second, know your rights under the Renters' Rights Act. From May 2026, your landlord cannot serve you a no-fault eviction. They cannot raise your rent without proper notice. You have the right to challenge unfair rent increases at a tribunal. These are real, enforceable protections. Use them. Third, consider looking beyond the obvious cities. If your work allows flexibility, smaller regional cities offer dramatically better value. A salary that stretches thin in London stretches very comfortably in Leeds, Sheffield, or even Edinburgh. And fourth, start building your financial position now. The renters who move out of renting and into ownership are the ones who started saving aggressively, who used help to buy ISAs or lifetime ISAs, who got their credit scores right, and who were ready when a property came up. It takes longer than it used to, but it is still possible. Now let me zoom out for a moment and give you the bigger picture, because I think this matters. What is happening in the UK rental market is not unique. Across Europe and North America, the same forces are at play. Aging housing stock, insufficient new construction, growing populations in urban centers, rising regulatory expectations. These are structural challenges that do not get solved in a single budget or a single policy. The Renters' Rights Act was a political response to genuine problems: insecurity, bad landlords, arbitrary evictions. Those problems are real. But housing policy is complicated, and unintended consequences are everywhere. The risk now is a market that ends up dominated by large corporations, where the warm, flexible relationship between an individual landlord and a long-term tenant becomes increasingly rare. What the UK needs, what has always been needed, is more housing supply, more homes built at all levels of the market, more social housing, more affordable home ownership routes, more planning reform to enable construction. Without that, every policy intervention is playing at the margins of a supply crisis. I hope this video has given you a genuinely useful picture of what is happening and why. The housing market in 2026 is not collapsing, but it is resetting. The rules are changing, the players are changing, and the people who understand those changes will navigate this moment far better than those who do not. If you are watching this on NestPath UK, this is exactly what we do here. We take complex, fast-moving topics and turn them into information you can actually use. If you found this video helpful, and I genuinely hope you did, please give it a thumbs up. It takes 2 seconds, and it helps this channel reach more people who need to understand what is happening in UK housing right now. Subscribe to NestPath UK if you have not already. We cover UK life, housing, immigration, finances, all the things that actually matter when you are building a life here. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Are you a renter feeling this pressure? Are you a landlord thinking about your next move? Or are you an investor watching this market and seeing opportunity? Drop your situation below. I read every comment, and your question might just inspire the next video. Thank you for watching. Stay informed, stay ahead, and I will see you in the next one.